Committee member Mayor?
Paul just emailed. He's lost the link. Could you please send it to me?
Okay. It looks like Paul will be joining us here in a second. I'll just finish out the roll call here. Committee member Painter?
Here.
Committee member Sherwood?
Here.
And committee member Strode?
Here.
And then I'll turn it back over to Nancy. She has to conduct a motion to approve the minutes.
I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the minutes for December 5th, 2019 Budget Committee meeting. Or I'll just move to approve the December 5th, 2019 Budget Committee meeting. Do I have a second? And who was that?
Renee.
Thank you, Renee. All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
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 Any opposed?
All against? Yeah. Any opposed, please? Yep. Okay, we're going to take that as unanimous. I'd like to mention one other thing, and that is, if you're not talking, would you please mute your phone? There's a lot of background noise.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. The
Okay,
first
let's turn this back over to David.
Thank you, Nancy. The first order of business is election of a committee chair. Per ORA statute, the Budget Committee is required to elect the presiding officer at the first meeting when they receive the budget message. I'd like to request Vice Chair Taylor to open the floor for nominations of the chair position for the fiscal year 2021 budget cycle. And just please note, committee members, please refrain from voting on the nominations until all nominations have been made and accepted and or declined.
Okay. Do I have a nomination for a chair?
This is Keith. I'd like to nominate Nancy.
Thank you,
If
Keith.
she'll accept.
I'll
I will
accept.
second that. This is Doug Scott.
Thank you, Doug. And do we have any other nominations? Okay,
All right.
let's close it, and we don't have any other nominations. Do we have to vote?
Yeah, just to be appropriate, let's still take a vote.
Okay, can we go around then and vote? Or how about this? All in favor? Aye or yes?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Aye.
you can unmute now. And then mute again. All opposed? Unmute and say opposed. Okay, now can I get a nomination for a vice chair? Unmute.
I would nominate Lana Painter.
I'll
Second.
And Lana, will you accept?
Oh, wow. I'll accept. I just feel like, am I really the best person when I haven't been on the committee before? Just throwing that out there. If people want to oppose, you're not going to hurt me.
Lana, it's really just running a meeting. If Nancy's
I
not
can run
here,
a
you would just run a meeting.
Okay. All right.
And Paul just joined the meeting.
Welcome, Paul.
Then I'll accept.
Okay. Tonight's meeting will be a virtual work and listening session with department directors' presentations. Pursuant to Executive Order 2016, this meeting will be conducted electronically and we will be live streaming on YouTube. Citizen comments must be submitted in writing to the Finance Director email address. Clearly stated that it is intended as a citizen comment and must be received 24 hours in advance. Given we are conducting this meeting virtually, I'd like to ask David Bodway, the Citizen Finance Director, if we received any comments.
We did receive comments. I emailed that packet out this afternoon, and it's a letter from some staff. One thing that, in discussion with the city attorney, I want to ask, and this is for the committee. Normally, we would be live and in person, and multiple folks would have a chance to talk. This letter was signed by 5 individuals. If they each got 4 minutes, you're talking a total of 20 minutes. Now, this is probably going to take me a little bit more than 4 minutes to read, but I need to open up and ask the committee, are you okay with me reading the entire letter, given that 5 employees have signed this letter? Is anybody opposed to that?
I think it was requested.
Yeah, and it was requested, yes.
I think it's fine.
I'm not opposed.
Fine.
Okay, so starting on page 1 for you folks on the committee, I'm just going to read through this letter, and for the folks at home, this has been all attached and is on our website. So I will start reading this letter. So we request that this letter be recorded and read into record for the May 21st, 2020 Budget Committee meeting as public comment. On May 18th, 2020, at 6:01 p.m., City Manager Joe Gell released his proposed 2020-21 budget. With this being after work hours, we did not receive this information until Tuesday morning, the 19th. Based on our current budget, there is a strategy that beginning July 1st, 2020, exempt staff will begin contributing 6% of their PERS. That was to help with the implementation of the police staff study, funding of additional general fund positions, that's being the court clerk, economic development manager, IT, and to keep the goal of a 20% ending fund balance. Attached is the May 16th, 2019 letter we provided to the Budget Committee during last year's budget cycle in regards to employee confusion, compensation, benefits, suggestions, and other surrounding cities' PERS contributions. What was not included in the May 16, 2019 letter is the history as to how the city began to contribute the 6% employee contribution of PERS. While many of us were not here during those years, we are fortunate to still have a few dedicated, tenured employees that recall this change to the city employee manual back in June of 2000. Resolution 2000-871 was recommended by the Budget Committee to begin contributing the employees' required 6% in lieu of a COLA increase. See attached, and those are at the latter pages. Staff at that time gave up their COLA in trade for the 6% contribution into PERS. Now, bargaining unit negotiations. Last year during the Budget Committee meetings, Budget Committee member Strode asked, effective 6/30/2020, all exempt employees will now be responsible for the 6% contribution to PERS. Is the city planning on making up this compensation with an increase in salaries in future years to make the overall benefit package comparable? How confident is the city that the bargaining units will agree to this change? One of the reasons for waiting until July 1st, 2020 was to provide adequate notice to affected staff of a shift this significant in their benefits. By waiting until 7/1/2020 to implement the employee contribution to PERS, the employees will benefit from a 3.5% COLA for fiscal year 2020, as well as a step increase ranging from 1.5% to 2.5% and another COLA for fiscal year 21. That has yet to be determined, likely around 2%. The alternative of freezing salaries was considered, but it would not negate the effort that was made to align the city's salaries with other comparable cities around us. The city will work with the bargaining units through the usual process, but it is always difficult to predict how these negotiations will turn out. We are confident that the resolution of the PERS shortfalls will require employee contributions in some form over the next few years, whether through negotiations or through state legislation in some form. Waiting another year before transferring the responsibility for the employee portion of PERS over to the employees and use fund balance to cover this amount for exempt employees affords us with the time to see what changes happen at the state level. This will help us to implement the best solution for the city and the employees as possible with the least likelihood of having to modify it again in the near future due to legislative changes. As indicated by response from then Finance Director Katie Henry, the city would begin to work with bargaining units to negotiate 6% employee contribution. Page 6 of the proposed budget, so the physical budget book, the city mentioned that it is currently in negotiations ratifying with the police union a new contract. Page 7 states of the budget book that the remaining employees within our bargaining units will be negotiated through the normal collective bargaining process. Now, page 57, which is the human resources budget detail, states negotiate new collective bargaining agreement with SPOA as a 2019-2020 highlight. While stated 3 times within the proposed budget that negotiations were taking place, we have been provided information that the 6% employee contribution by the police union is not being negotiated and the contract is going to be for 2 years. As you can understand, we are confused as to why the city is not applying this budget strategy to all employees and not follow through with the statement above. Is this because exempt employees have no legal representation with which to defend themselves? The next part of this letter is titled City Ending Fund Balance. The Budget Committee has a goal to retain a 20% operating revenue in the ending fund balance. Page 3 of the proposed budget states a projected ending fund balance of 34%. As stated by Joe, this is well above our overall fiscal policy of having an ending fund balance equal to or at least 20% of total operating revenue. This equates to an additional $1.2 million be forecasted as available. Page 10 of the proposed budget illustrates projects that through fiscal year 21-22, the city will continue to meet the Budget Committee goal of a 20% operating revenue ending fund balance, and that was illustrated below in that letter. Now, the next title of this letter is PERS Adjustments. Below are a few statements which were provided in the proposed budget. Page 34 of the proposed budget shows PERS rates will not change for the upcoming budget period. Page 7 does not compare an equitable picture as to how PERS costs have gone up from fiscal year 2009-10 to fiscal year 2019-20. In fiscal year 2009-10, the city employed 102.79 FTE. The 2020-21 proposed budget has 122.7 FTE. This same page states Senate Bill 1049 was passed by the state legislature in 2019 to address our state's PERS crisis. Provided certain provisions of the bill are upheld in court, our city's PERS rates are projected to begin to stabilize beginning in the next biennium, 2021-2023. Please note that the above 5-year ending fund balance forecast carrying the city forward while maintaining a 20% budget committee goal of ending fund balance through 2021. Even though rates are projected to stabilize, our organization and ultimately taxpayers can no longer continue to absorb these costs. The 5-year fund balance forecast appears to meet the city required 10% threshold for ending fund balance for the next 5 years. Now, in conclusion to this letter, many of your exempt staff prepare, implement, and manage a large portion of the budget. Many of your exempt staff have been preparing, protecting, and covering for the representative staff during the COVID pandemic. During the budget process, we were not asked if there were one-time expenses that could be delayed or rephasing of projects or to consider service level goals as a way to assist the city to continue to equally offer the PERS benefit to all staff. We are not given the opportunity to have a discussion about employee contribution to PERS prior to release of the proposed budget. We appreciate your willingness to read our concerns. As loyal and dedicated staff, we ask that you consider the following. Equally treat all staff members within the city with regards to PERS. As indicated above, it does not appear to be the city manager's approach with regards to the current negotiation with the police union. As mentioned in our letter dated May 16, 2019, we again request that Council and the Budget Committee task the city manager to explore all options for funding additional staffing to meet Council's overarching goal by way of a public safety fee, public safety levy, cut in level of service goals, budget cuts, freeze on hiring. This past budget year, Several positions were hired in the police department without a stable funding source, and again this year, additional police positions are included in the budget without a stable funding source. Another option, review the necessity for one-time expenses to determine true needs to the city versus cosmetic expenses that are not necessary to perform work/maintain infrastructure. Utilize excessive ending fund balance to contribute to exempt employees 6%. The budget forecast appears to provide funding and the time to negotiate with individual unions so all employees can be treated equally. We ask that you realize that the loss of the 6% will have a long-term impact on our retirement that is more than 6%. We will potentially have to pay payroll taxes on this, which will cost the city additional money. While 6% may not seem to be much of a contribution, this will have a long-term effect on employees' retirement, and the city needs to recognize that staff may leave as a result of this. Sincerely, Darren Canaprelli? Is that how I pronounce that?
Canaparelli.
Canaprelli.
Try not.
Amy Gillette, Kathy McWilliams, Rich Sutler, and Steve Ziegler. And there were 2 attachments. The resolution back in 2000, just when the contribution changed from employee paid to city paid, and then the May 16th, 2019 letter that was given to the Budget Committee last fiscal year. And so that ends the public comment, or the reading of the letter.
Okay, do we have any discussion?
I'm good.
We don't usually do discussions during citizen comment.
Do you want to ask any questions of the citizens? I mean, do you guys want to respond back to them through David in an email? I know it's not a discussion, but. Okay, I'm going to take that as a no, so I'm going to close citizen comments.
I think we ought to accept the letter and recognize that they have sent it, and we'll consider it in our budget discussions.
Sounds good.
Yep.
That sounds very fair.
Nancy, do you want me to go ahead to the next item then?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm sorry, I have the wrong one in front of me right now.
That's okay. We're going to
Yes,
fumble through
please.
this a little bit together, so it's not the most efficient way of doing things since we're all in different places.
Okay, 1 second. Actually, let's move to new business. How's that?
Correct.
And Joe, can I have you start with the budget overview? And everyone
Yes.
else, let's mute.
So I'm going to, as I usually do, I'm not going to read my budget message, but I am going to highlight some things that I think are important. Hopefully the committee had a chance to review the budget committee or the budget message. That's usually a good starting point. So I'm on page 3 in the booklet. And again, I'm just going to hit on some highlights that I think are important to our overall conversation and your consideration of the budget. First, paragraph 2, I think we all know that we're in this COVID-19 pandemic situation. This budget has been like no other budget that anybody has ever been involved with. We started this process back in January, and COVID was not something that even was on our radar, except just hearing what was happening in China. And obviously, the world turned upside down for all of us in March. This also happens to be David's first budget as our finance director, so hopefully he will never have a budget like this ever again as well. My point in this paragraph is that with so much uncertainty in the world, that this budget proposal in front of you is a snapshot in time. It's what we know now today. Things can change drastically. We've seen that over the last few months. We may have to come back 6 months or more frequently during the next fiscal year to make adjustments up or down depending on how the world changes. So I don't think anyone in government in terms of, or even in businesses as well, in terms of predicting what the year ahead is going to be, no one really has a great crystal ball. And I just want to stress that. The next section, the overview, I just want to hit on that this budget was developed and is largely driven by council goals. So City Council has been very clear with me and my staff in terms of what they believe as the elected officials in the city, the priorities of the city should be. So I tried to craft a budget or a proposed budget that addresses those goals. The few increases in personnel are in public safety, which we'll go through, and then a small increase in IT, which is really to dedicate some existing IT resources to Sherwood Broadband, which is a priority for the council. And as we talked about last year through this process, and as the letter from staff talked about, I am recommending the beginning of a shift of the 6% employee pickup as part of this budget. And when we get into the 5-year forecast with David, you'll see some of the rationale for that. I think the biggest changes.
Joe, can I ask a quick question on that?
Sure.
That 6% pickup, that's the employee portion that the city has traditionally paid, not the 6% that will continue to pay. There's two pieces, right?
Now, are you talking for the various, for example, like SPOA, ASHME?
No, just for the 6% pickup that Joe's talking about for exempt stack. There's two parts to that. There's a portion the city has always paid, and there's a portion that the city has paid for the employees that I think, Joe, you're asking them to start paying now. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's basically two resources that are going out the door. We have the contribution that the city is required to make to assist with their unfunded liability. And then also there's the 6% employee side account, which some entities contribute for their staff, some entities do not. But it's not 6%. The city's contribution, let me see here. I just want to get that exact figure for you because those rates are set in the biennium and they're well above 6%. Let me just get that for you. I apologize while I'm pulling up my worksheet here. So for Tier 1, Tier 2 employees, that rate right now is 26.61% of their salary is contributed by the city. And this is just employer-required contribution. This is not referring to the 6%. And then for the Tier 3 general services is 18.28%. And for the Tier 3 police, it's 22.91%.
Okay, and the 6% that, Joe, you're talking about having the employees pick up is not part of that number. It's a separate number that some cities pay and some cities don't.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. I thought that's what it was. Thanks for verifying all those numbers. I was trying to get it straight in my head. No worries.
There are some, and we'll go through this when we get, especially to community services, there are some revenues that have been reduced since COVID, largely things that with the closure of the Arts Center, I said, obviously we're not renting the facility out. The Sherwood Fieldhouse isn't having leagues. So those are the kind of revenues that have been reduced as a result of what's going on with COVID. And we can get into specifics as we get to those various programs and departments. The last paragraph on page 3, I think it's always important. Where are we ending the year? We are ending the year on a solid basis. A year ago at this time, we projected that we would have an ending fund balance of 3.7 million, or 26%, and we are projecting to be at 4.9 or 34%, above our 20% goal. So you take a snapshot in time, we're ending this year in a very solid position. On page 4, you start to get a summary of the budget. There's a very important chart there that shows the general fund and then all the different funds, and you can compare the current year's budget to what we are proposing for next year. The two that I always highlight, the general fund is actually projected in this budget to slightly go up 0.7% next year compared to this year. And if you look at all funds, there is a reduction of 2.9% in the proposed budget. And you can see the various funds and the differences. And again, as we get into the specifics, we can talk about those as you see fit. On page 5, toward the end, I want to highlight we always separate out one-time expenditures. There are less one-time expenditures this year than in previous years. The fund, the total is $737,000 approximately. I think, David, did you send out a list of all those, or do you have a list?
Yeah, it came in that packet this afternoon around 3 o'clock, and that's located on page
13.
13. Thank you.
And the reason we do that, I think this city, compared to other cities that I'm familiar with, is always on page 6. There's these two very important financial policies that we identify sustainable revenue levels and fund it with sustainable revenues or operations compared to revenues. So that's why we pull out those one-time expenses, and we have to have a balanced budget, which this is a balanced budget. So that's why we always break that out the way we do. Page 6 talks about the new changes in the budget, 122.7 FTE positions, which is an increase of 2.7 compared to current year. Those are 2 police officers starting approximately September 1st, and then an IT support tech position that if it gets approved in the budget, we'd like to have on board as soon as possible, even by July 1st. So those are the additions to the budget in terms of staff levels. Later on that page talks about the COLAs. We have budgeted a 2.6% COLA for non-represented employees and AFSCME employees. We are currently in negotiations with SPOA and have budgeted a 1.5% COLA for that, but we are still negotiating. So page 7 of the budget message, about midway through the page, is my discussion about the PERS shift. I am proposing to sunset the city's payment over the next few years, starting with non-represented in this proposed budget. Other important highlights on page 7, some of the major priorities. I'm very happy to report that the city's comprehensive plan update is going to be done by the end of this calendar year. That's been a multi-year effort that hopefully will be wrapped up by the end of this year. A very important project with a lot of time and resources that have been put into it. There are improvements to the water treatment facility in Wilsonville. Some of those were planned to do this fiscal year that are been delayed and will be in next fiscal year. And then we have water infrastructure projects within the Brookman area and the Tonkin employment area as part of this budget. Pages 8 and 9 are just summaries of the different enterprise funds. Nothing I necessarily want to highlight right now. If you go to page 10 of the budget message, you'll see the 5-year forecast. That 5-year forecast is assuming that you were to approve the budget as it is proposed. So we would be at the end of this next fiscal year, if everything worked out, at 28% of fund balance. And then it goes down, and we end up at the 10% level in year 5, which is barely making our minimum financial goal. The chart at the bottom of page 10 shows operating revenues to expenses, and we're balanced, and then you have the one-time expense costs, and then the change in fund balance is about $500,000 as proposed. So that's a very quick snapshot of my budget message. Unless there's any questions, I think it's important also to present the 5-year forecast and the work that David's done with different scenarios. Any questions before moving forward? Okay, David.
All right, with that, let's talk about the 5-year forecast. We'll wait to talk about the various options that I sent to you folks, just kind of showing, okay, what are all the different scenarios. So this is I'm going to be discussing the 5-year forecast that's located on page 10 of Joe's budget message. So what are some of the major factors that are going into this forecast? As Joe has already discussed, we are looking at adding 2 officers September 1st. IT support tech starting as soon as possible, and the way I work the budget is I had this individual starting July 1st. And then there's also 2 more officers, part of the police staffing plan I budgeted in for the following fiscal year, with one of those in hopes of being an SRO. And then with that, I know an important goal of City Council is economic development, and in this proposed 5-year forecast, we are looking at making the economic development manager no longer a limited term position. We're looking at making that a full-time permanent position. And also in this forecast, as Joe has already stated, he's looking as of July 1st, I apologize for that. July 1st, non-reps begin paying the 6%. And the total cost of that over the next 5 years is a little bit over $1.2 million in savings for the city. That's all the 5 years added together. That's, there's some estimations in there of a COLA increase of around a 2.5%, and I took the average of, it varies where you're at on the schedule. Some folks get a step increase of 2.5%, some get a step increase of 1.5%. So I just split it down the middle of a 2% step increase. This forecast includes all facility, fleet, parks, all their equipment replacement, vehicle replacements that Craig Sheldon over at Public Works, the Public Works Director, that he sent me in his master plans, kind of showing stuff that needs to be replaced. This is all included in the 5-year forecast. This does take into account the current URA closing down in fiscal year 22-23. We're slowly starting to draw down those tax revenues. I know Katie Strode asked a very great question on property taxes, and I did mention that we are slowly drawing down the amount that we are levying on for the URA. So that just provides additional tax revenue for the city. This does also take into account Senate Bill 1049. I know I haven't heard the update on what possibly is going in the courts. I know it sounds like if there's going to be any court battle over that Senate bill, it's really on the employee redirect. Because that 6% contribution, for folks that don't know on the committee or folks that don't know at home, so if you're a Tier 3 employee, that 6% side account that you have with that Senate bill now, 0.75% is going to be redirected to the bigger pot to help with the overall unfunded liability. So Tier 3 employees are really only going to be getting 5.25% in that side account. While Tier 1 and Tier 2 employees, I believe it's 2.25% is going to be redirected. So by a portion of that 6% being redirected, that is starting to help the project to stabilize some of these PERS rates. Now, if this were to be overturned in the courts, I would be doing some big revisions to my 5-year forecast, because then I think we'd go back to originally what Katie had in her prior year forecast of PERS rates going up and going up for quite some time. And with that, I'm open for questions. Before I open up for questions, and also this assumes a 5.5% to 6% increase in health insurance costs. That's usually on average what we have seen here at the city for quite some time, and so I just continued on that trend. Kind of followed closely a little bit too with what Katie had in her original projections, and everything I've reviewed and I've seen, I just kept with that trend. So yeah, with that, I am open up for any questions on the 5-year forecast.
I had a question. This is Kim Young. Could you repeat the 5-year forecast and what it includes for the PD staffing moving forward?
Yes. Okay. So for the PD staffing, I know we're looking to add 2 officers starting September 1st, 2020. So this current budget we're talking about. But then next year's budget, we're going to discuss adding an additional 2 more officers, with, in hopes, one of those being an SRO. I know on the original police staffing plan, that SRO was slated for possibly this fiscal year, but due to some complications with COVID, it sounds like things are being moved around a little bit. So the 2 officers are going to be added this year, and 2 officers next year, with one of those being an SRO.
But your cost projections for that include next year, the full cost of both offices?
Yes.
Not a contribution from the school district?
No.
Thank you.
Correct me if I'm wrong, and obviously this is at discretion of Chief and Joe, but with our funding, we could fund an SRO this year if that's what we choose to do. We're not holding it for a year for any particular reason of our control. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I have a question. This is Tim. The IT support specialist, I think is what you called it, Joe.
Yes.
I'm assuming that's part of this 5-year forecast.
Yes. Correct.
For the general fund. So, and maybe I'm jumping ahead. That position is to support Sherwood broadband. So is there also the projection for the offsetting revenue, or is that for IT for the city itself?
That's for IT, the city itself, because some current employees are going to be shifted more over to broadband. So they need to backfill some of those folks that are shifting to kind of help with this regular day-to-day support.
So what's the net FTE increase then if we're shifting current IT staff over to Sherwood broadband, which is an enterprise fund, if I understand, which is, we do get revenue to offset that. What's the actual FTE increase? It's not one. It sounds like it's not one full FTE.
I don't know if Brad's on the phone, where if he could jump in, because I know he was allocating. I don't know if it was full-time one of his staff moving, or if it was a portion of it, if it was 75% of the staff member.
Okay, yeah, that'd be interesting to know, because if that's neutral for the general fund, then that would be great to.
I will look into that question for you, Tim.
Thanks.
Okay, any other questions on the 5-year forecast?
Hey, David, this is Nancy Taylor. I have a quick question on the 5-year forecast. Did you do a projection? Am I just missing it? If the 6% was actually paid and wasn't taken out of the budget, did you project that?
Yes, it's on page 10 of that first packet that I sent with the agenda item. Yeah, so if you look at page 10, there's multiple different scenarios I included on that.
Okay.
And and it's represented by the yellow line, if you folks can see that.
Okay, good. All right, I see.
Yeah, so that was taking us down to just a little bit over $500,000. So basically, if we hired all the employees and the city continued to pay the 6%, our ending fund balance projected at the end of 2025 would be it'd be between about $550,000 to $600,000.
Just 3%?
Yeah, which is about 3% of operating revenues.
David, this is Renee. Is there a scenario that shows, I see on the chart in 2023, no additional staff, city pays non-rep 6%. Is there, that's not even what I wanted to ask. Anyway, is there a chart that would show waiting until the union folks are caught up to having to pay the 6%? If we were to wait on that.
I could run that. I do have the cost. If you folks were to kick this down the road 1 year, let me just pull that up here. I haven't ran the scenario, and just be reminded this 5-year forecast, because I don't know how negotiations will go with unions. This only takes into account the non-reps paying the 6%. So this could look better, a lot better if ASHME and SPOA were to get on board with the 6% contribution. But for example, let me just pull this up. Yeah. So that a rough estimation, a scenario that I ran showed that in fiscal year 21, the 6% would cost for the non-rep employees would cost a little over $221,000. And you have to remember, I know last year all that one-time money was included in the general fund, but a lot of those non-rep folks get allocated out to various funds. So when you get into the detail, you might notice, there might be some PERS expenditures a little higher. That should have been split out and allocated. I did a rough calculation where 93% of those non-rep folks, their salaries are charged to the general fund, but about 7% of the total salary is allocated out to whether it's the water fund or the sewer fund. But in total for the city, you're looking a little over $221,000 if you were to kick it down the road another year.
Okay, and I'm asking because part of what I was hearing in the letter was the making sure that it was fair and equitable to all the staff and not just the one bracket. Thank you.
The top green line.
And then on that 5-year forecast where it's titled is page 10, 5-year financial forecast options, you can see there's a green line in there. And I just want to, since we've already talked about the other two, the green line represents no additional staffing. So that would be not adding any new police officers the next 2 fiscal years, not adding the IT tech, not making the economic development manager's position a full-time position. You can see where the fund balance is significantly higher.
But that would still pay the 6%.
That would still have the city paying the 6% for the non-reps.
So that top line actually is no new staff for 5 years.
And so would you like me to run a scenario, what it would look like if we kicked it down the road another year? It would be pretty simple for me to run and send it out to the committee for the next meeting for everyone to have a little bit of time to look at it.
Kicking it down another year and then waiting until the unions catch up, or?
Yeah, I didn't know if that was the point you were making. Well, if we were to contribute another year for the non-represented folks, we'd have ASHME negotiations occurring roughly next spring, with SPOA coming back around the following year. But the timing is never going to work out between those two unions, so you could get a majority of employees next spring.
I would like to see that, but I don't know what others feel about that. I don't want you to go to extra work if it's not something that the whole wants to see.
Other
I could
thoughts?
see value. I could see value in seeing it if it's not too much work, David.
It'd take me less than 5 minutes to run it.
Okay.
Then yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
I would like to see it as well. This is Russell, but maybe we could do, can you do 2 years? Since if the contract with SPOA goes through, it'll be 2 years before, it'll be a year before we renegotiate, but it'll be 2 years before the new contract kicks in.
Yep. I apologize, whoever I just spoke over.
Oh, it's Councilor Young. Can I just jump in and just say that, we're still in negotiations with SPOA, and so nothing's been finalized, and we probably shouldn't be talking about our negotiations.
Well, we haven't said anything specific about our negotiations, really. The most specific thing we've mentioned is what Joe mentioned in his budget message. That was the most specific thing.
Yeah, but we can't even infer what's going on in our current negotiations. I don't know how in that letter they mentioned they heard about the negotiations, but we just need to stay away from that per the rules around those union negotiations.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is we don't know until the negotiations are over what the outcome will be with either the current SPOA negotiations or future ASME negotiations. So we could do projections based on possible outcomes, but we don't know what those outcomes will be or when they will be.
Correct.
And that will not, after tonight's meeting, I will run a bunch of different scenarios, send them out to the committee. And if that's what you're looking for, let me know and we can discuss those next Thursday. Or if you wanted something different, just let me know. This is a pretty slick system that I work with where it's pretty easy to plug in information and it populates stuff pretty quickly.
I have a question too, David. This is Katie. Do we have something that shows what the projected PERS rates are for the next biennium? Because I know everything that I've heard is that PERS rates are going to go up based on the current market situation. So I think that's something to take into consideration too about picking up the 6% longer, is that it could have more of a financial impact than what we even think now.
Are you thinking for the 23-25 biennium?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just the forecast.
Yep.
And David, I don't know if this is possible, but I think we brought this up. I think this was in the minutes from our last meeting, but is there any way we could do a forecast that would show what would happen if the unions win their lawsuit with the state against HB 2016? Because that is a risk.
Yep.
All of this that we should also be looking at.
It would be some very rough projections, but I can.
I would like to see that too, because I've heard that that's a likely outcome.
Yeah.
I think that it's important. We need to look at worst case scenarios.
Okay. Yep, I'll have that ready for you folks. And I'm not cutting you folks off right now. I'm just writing all this stuff down. But yes, I will get whatever you're requesting on me. I'll get working on right away.
Thank you, David.
I have a question on a different topic, if that was an appropriate time.
Sure.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Regarding the onboarding of the 2 new police staff, and I'm pretty sure when we brought on new staff last fiscal, we staggered those hires, maybe 6 months apart or something, one in the first half of the year and one in the second half of the year. Given the uncertainty of, the world right now in every way, including our financial outlook, I'm wondering if it makes sense to target one of those as a September 1st hire and maybe one of them as more of a January to March hire or something like that, just to help buy time, to get more certain on our revenue side before we make that plunge.
We can certainly do that. Chief Grove might want to chime in on any cautions he has on that. I don't see any, but Chief, do you have any comments at this time on that idea?
Everybody, this is Jeff. So we budgeted last year July 1, January 1, and we ended up hiring, just because of the timing, both of them around October, which is essentially was the same number of months of savings. So Joe and I discussed it. We came up with September 1 is just kind of a reality date, and we certainly could phase one of them to January 1 as well. So anything's possible.
How many academies are held during the year, Jeff?
I really didn't want to be stumped tonight. There's probably
I'm the chief.
in a normal year, I think they average somewhere around one a month new that they start. And of course, at any one time, they're probably running 3 to 4 classes just because of overlap. But of course, now everything's in chaos. So they had 2 classes that got suspended. In fact, our 2 officers made it halfway through, and then they go back. They got sent home, and they go back in June, and they just started in May. They just resumed the class before there. So there's going to likely be some catch up. So I think we're just going to have to wait and see what the class schedule is going to end up looking like.
Okay.
There's also always, I apologize, there's also always the possibility of hiring a lateral officer, which is somebody that's already certified and would not need to go to the police academy, which would, that's a great opportunity when we can do that, but they're the exception and not the rule.
What's the difference in the costs, overall costs?
Very little, if any. We generally don't budget for recruit pay just to be on the safe side. So we generally budget around step 3 just to give us some flexibility so that if we do have a lateral, we will be able to absorb that. So it just depends on their years of experience where they'll start on the salary schedule.
Thanks, Joe. Or Jeff.
Hey, Jeff, this is Nancy. Can I ask you another question?
Of course.
Right now, we have an SRO officer, correct?
Correct.
With no school, what is our SRO officer doing?
He's working patrol, assisting with patrol.
Okay, so he's filled in other places where he's needed, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And this is Tim again, just to kind of switching back to the 5-year forecast, just a general caution. Having sat in the finance and taxation, LOC committee meetings, and some of the other LOC committee meetings over the last month, the governor has asked all the departments at the state level to look for, I believe it was 17% savings. There was a recent economic forecast that came out for the state that it looks like they're looking at a 13% hit to their budgets. I think it was like $3.4 billion in the current biennium.
2.7.
I'm sorry?
2.7.
2.7 billion in the current biennium. And I just saw an Oregonian article that they're forecasting 10 billion hit over the next 5 years, I believe it was. So the reason I bring that up is there was a lot of conversations about how that could potentially impact dollars that flow from the state to the cities. And so we have to be very cautious because it's going into this next long session with the legislature. Who knows what's going to happen? Because, some of our general fund money does come from the state.
That's correct.
Any other questions at this time on the different scenarios for the forecast? Okay, now we're going to get into each of the different programs and departments, which unless there's lots of questions, we may be going through this fairly quickly, is my guess. I want to start on page 53 and 53A, which is City Council's budget. I'll give everyone a moment to get to those pages.
Sorry, Joe, what was the page number again?
53 and 53A is the detail expenditures.
Thank you.
So overall, and this is actually at the bottom of 53B, the expenditures proposed for next year is slightly below the current year at 33,000 approximately, compared to 39 in the current year. Number of items have been bumped down. I want to highlight 6209, the travel training budget is slightly less than what is proposed this year. There's a good chance we may not use all that, but I think there may be some travel when we're allowed to travel again for Mayor Mays and others to go back to DC. I anticipate that there will be lots of opportunity for federal dollars that we will be looking to bring back to Sherwood. And part of that is always going back east and working with our lobbyists. The LOC conference is probably going to be virtual. There'll be a cost to it. So there'll be some savings there. So that's the one item that we actually may not spend as much. We're only projecting to spend slightly below 8,000 this year in a normal year. So, but I want to have enough money to do multiple trips to DC if needed. Otherwise it's, and I won't use the word status quo, right, Councilor Young? Otherwise, it's a pretty consistent budget with this current year.
It's a maintenance level budget.
Maintenance level, there you go. Is that a Clackamas County term?
That's a Clackamas County term. Oop, your battery's running low.
Oh, that's not good.
Did it get unplugged?
Must got to unplug somehow. Nope, there we go. Sorry, it said my battery was going low. It got unplugged, so. Any questions on council's budget? Hearing none, the next is the city recorder's budget, page 54A. Sylvia's on the line to answer any specific questions, but this is also a slight decrease overall. The one item to highlight, the elections line, 6105. We budgeted 30,000. That may be a little high, but as you saw, we spent 36,000 in 17-18 and 37,000 in 19-20. Normally, in prior years to that, we would get by with 15,000 in that line item, and we still are budgeting a little bit higher, just to ensure that we have enough money for any elections. And those are usually special elections and things that there are costs associated, not general elections.
And we ended up conducting a supplemental budget for this current fiscal year, 1920, to boost that up due to that November election that happened, special election.
Any questions on city recorder?
One quick question on the elections. If a outside agency like Metro did a special election bond or something that we got rolled into because we're in that territory, would we have to pay for those election costs, or is it just when we initiate a special election, like if there's to fill a council seat or a recall or something like that?
Sylvia, can you answer that? I'm looking for Sylvia on the bottom.
Joe, I can answer that. We only pay for items where we put an item on the agenda or on the ballot, not if it's another entity putting it on the ballot.
Okay, so last year that was for the charter changes then.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I ask for a little clarification on that? This is Sean Garland. So if the city council refers an initiative petition to be a ballot measure on, let's say, November ballot, is there a cost to the city?
Sylvia, are you here? Your mic's muted.
Looks like Sylvia's muted, yeah.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. So I'm sorry, what was the last question? I didn't get that.
If there's a citizen initiative ballot that the city council chooses to use their power to place it on the November ballot, is there a cost to the city to do that?
Not if that's in a general election. So a general election would occur in an even-numbered year. So if there was something for this general election November of this year, there would not be a cost other than the public noticing, but the actual ballot, the pamphlet, there would not be a cost.
Thanks.
Okay, any other questions for the recorder's budget? Next is the city manager's budget on page 55 and then 55A. This department's budget is also projected to be slightly smaller than the current year. I do want to highlight 6198, which is the professional and technical service line. You see a large increase in 1920 and then in 2021. That is largely because we are using the services of a federal lobbyist again, which is CFM, and then also a state lobbyist, also CFM, different people, of course, same firm. That is primarily why those numbers have gone up. And my editorial comment about especially the state lobbyist is, although COVID happened, we got another allocation or a commitment to an allocation for a pedestrian bridge. And I believe probably the only reason we got that is because we had CFM working the halls in Salem and working very hard with our legislators on an almost daily basis to help solicit that money.
I couldn't agree more, Joe. They did a great job, and not only for the $2 million additional for the pedestrian bridge, but the helped us with getting the funding to do the study for 99 West from Sherwood all the way up through Tigard for long-term planning, which was dearly needed as well. They did a great job.
And then another just comment about our Washington lobbyists. Not only are they following what's going on in DC, which is hard enough, they also put together the way we have our contract with them. They actually do the bulk of the grant writing now for us. So besides lobbying, they do a lot of the work to apply for different grants, which is very time consuming, and that is a benefit to us as well. And they know the ins and outs of the different programs. So I think these are worthwhile investments. They're not inexpensive, but they pay off in the long run.
And the grant writing is a huge benefit of that contract. It is not easy to put a grant application together successfully at the state or federal level.
Yeah.
We've done it as a city, but if we have people that are doing it day in, day out, they can do it faster, easier, and the odds are better because of it.
Especially at the federal level.
Yeah.
And they're actually putting one together this week with Julia and Bruce for some CARES dollars through EDA that we're going after for some work in the Tonkin employment area. So those are valuable resources for us to invest in.
Yep, fully agree with that. I think it's great to have specialists in those fields that can concentrate their time and efforts on that and let us do some of our more local stuff. So I'm glad that the work that they've done over the last year.
Certainly seems like we're getting a lot of bang for our buck there.
Yeah, and just for those out in the TV land or YouTube land watching us, I mean, They have the connections they have at the federal level and at the state level are amazing, and they're opening doors for us that we normally can't get open. And I experienced that personally when I did speed dating with about 16 different representatives and senators down in Salem as we were lobbying for the bridge, and they set all that up. They have those relationships. They got us through those doors, and we wouldn't have gotten through those doors without them.
Thank you for those comments. Any questions about the city manager budget?
Joe, it says you have 2,900 friends.
Oh, that was in 1819. We're at 3,500 now.
Okay.
I don't know if they're actually friends.
It just made me laugh. I had to say something.
Okay, next is the city attorney on 56A. Josh, do you have anything that you want to stress or highlight in your budget proposal?
Yeah, the one thing I think I would highlight is the 56A line 6104 for outside legal expenses. The bulk of that is for labor negotiation expenses, and a lot of that is just best guess projections at this point. Depending on how the current negotiations with SPOA go, there's a chance that may change even significantly, that projection, before this budget is adopted. So just to anticipate that may change. But I'm happy to answer any questions otherwise.
That was line 6198 you're referring to?
6104.
6104. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, you'll see a noticeable jump both in 1920 and then 2021 compared to the prior years. Okay, moving on. Christina, are you on the call?
I am.
Okay, so Human Resources is next, page 57, 57A. So there were two lines that I wanted to highlight that you may have noticed, and Christina, if you can chime in. 6198, there is an increase to $35,000 on that line item, which is compared to the 21.5, although we're spending 35 this year. Can you talk a little bit about what that was?
I don't have that. I think David was going to help with that one, or with another one.
I can help out with the next one too. I know. Councilor Griffin had a question on that software. But I believe that's the one where we're using a lot, whether it's, a lot more applications. You're using
NeoGov?
NeoGov. I was going to say GeoGov. You're using that services quite a bit more. Also in there, it was interesting to see the way this was budgeted. Also in there, we do use an outside consultant. And I noticed how it was the fiscal year 1920. If you kind of look at 6201, 6202, and 6203, you could see that some of those liability insurances were reporting a little bit higher. And then you look at projected versus proposed. Well, what was getting mixed into these was the consultant's fee. And so we're moving that up to where it actually should be under other professional and technical services. And really, we need to show the true cost of our insurance versus lumping in that consultant into that mix.
Okay.
So that's the reason why that jumped from 21,000 to 35,000. So really, this is kind of what's reporting in fiscal year 1920, and again in fiscal year 2021 really shows the true cost of our three different buckets of whether it's liability insurance, property insurance, or auto insurance. And then the next question came up earlier today, just on software subscriptions. There isn't really any big changes. I know there's been a little bit of discussion, and I can even attest to this. It's very difficult to get information out of this system, and it's very time-consuming. And, you know, I would like to look at other options in this human resource area just to assist Christina a little bit more in her day-to-day operations. You know, as I am learning quite a bit of what, you know, what the capabilities are of the system, you know, it kind of limits Christina a little bit too in what she does. And then also we need to look at getting her, I didn't see this budgeted in prior years, the correct Adobe software where you could actually be able to do all the functions that you should be able to want to do, and especially in that capacity as a human resources manager, I think it's very important for her to have that software. So that's the one.
David?
Yes.
So I'm sorry. What was the answer to that question? What's the increase in the 6216? What software are we? I mean, do we get something new, or are we reallocating something? I didn't hear the answer.
Yeah, no, there's no software out there. There's just been some discussions floating around of, well, we could, there's potentially software out there. We could always adjust that back down. We're thinking about, and that if we do get something new, it might be around that ballpark. Yes. Okay, I got it. Thank you. And definitely I want to get her the Adobe software so she could actually transact some of the businesses, you know, the full Adobe Reader Writer. Because I don't believe she has that. Thank you.
So we don't have Adobe as a city?
No, there's subscriptions, and so certain computers have. It is very expensive. I think it's Brad could correct me if I'm wrong. I think it might be like $794 per year per subscription.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and so that's for the souped up, that's for the writer, that's for the creator, where you can modify PDF documents. You know, some folks just have Reader where, you know, you can't really manipulate the document at all, or, you know, get it the way you need it to look. So, but, you know, someone in that position, especially in HR, I think it would be appropriate for to have that kind of software.
I don't know what they're charging governments, but I can get Adobe, that Adobe product you're talking about for $19 a month.
Yeah, I was going to say the same. Thanks.
Well, if I can clarify a little bit. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. We have full version of Adobe, but we bought it years ago when they didn't have subscription versions. And now if you want to get anything new, you have to buy the subscription version. So yes, it's about $20 a user. And I think in the budget this year, we put money in for those that had the older full version to upgrade to the subscription version of Acrobat. So just to clarify that. And then we do have Reader on everybody's desk, which.
How many people are we talking about that need that?
I think we have about 30 licenses.
Not there.
Okay, so now you're talking $600 a month.
Yeah.
Do we need to evaluate how many people actually use or need the full version of Reader or of Acrobat?
I think that is part of the process as well. There's a little bit of training involved there to make sure people know what they can do with the Reader version, the free version, versus what you can do with the full version. And some people do need the full version. But I think as we go through that process, we'll evaluate who needs to be able to really edit a PDF and who just needs to be able to create a PDF, which is a big difference.
Yes.
Yes.
So, thank you. So, Joe knows this question. David, it'll be the first time for you, but I ask it every year in the budget cycle. Have we created a spreadsheet that lists all of our maintenance and current SaaS agreements, everything that we're paying, so we can audit that?
No, we have not. I know I have a little bit for finances. Of course, there are some things that I would like to talk to Josh to see if we could get out of some contracts, because what a company may have to offer, we could probably do in Excel. And it'd be a lot easier, a lot complicated. It'd make my staff's life easier. I know that's pretty sad to say, but when you're paying $20,000 for this one specific product, and you're really utilizing it as an Excel program, I'd rather just use it in Excel.
Yeah, and a lot of you have heard this, but I'll say it again. It's a broken record, but in my old company selling software to cities, we saw it over and over again. I'd get phone calls from cities saying, "Hey, we've been paying for this module for 5 years. We never used it. Could we get a refund?" I mean,
Yeah.
it's amazing what piles up out there and you kind of forget about. So
I think to Tim's point, though, I think it's important to understand how much software we have out there and how they're integrated together, too, because I don't want to remove software that somehow is feeding into a separate report and suddenly we've broken some type of automated reporting system. So that really bolsters Tim's point that he has made several times about getting a full inventory of what we're using.
Yep. I'd be willing to wager that you'll find savings through that effort. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure.
So that's got to be a David, and I'm sorry, that has to be a combined effort of Brad and his team with David.
And with, all the department directors. Because, there's, we use the terminology out at the county, shadow systems. There's a lot of systems out there that don't talk exactly to the main program we use that basically houses all the financial data, and there might be some other systems out there and some other programs that are needed to run that system. And so really it'd be a team effort with the senior leadership, really to look at, okay, hey, basically talking with our employees too, okay, well, what do you have on your desk? Or is there an easy way just to pull up their program screens, kind of scroll through to see what they have too?
Yeah, and one step farther, and I'm not suggesting we do this right now, but really evaluating the overall software and strategy for the system when it comes to ERP systems. Where is it appropriate to have a standalone system in a department versus you need systems that integrate cross department? At some point we probably need to look really close at that. Not now. I know we're busy now. So
I'll just add, we have a very detailed list of the software that we own and that we pay for. I think where the value comes from, and I don't know if this is exactly what you're asking, is the finance program has a business license module, and the Infor product has a business license module. Which one is best to use? So I think that's an exercise that, especially now going to the cloud, is a perfect time for us to look at that and potentially on the heels of maybe new finance system here in the coming years to really dig into that. But as far as standalone applications, I don't know that we have many that would do those typical ERP functions. Obviously with software, you can make it do a lot of that, do anything you want. It's the amount of time and effort and maybe programming, but I think there's great value in looking at the ERPs and figuring out which modules fit the business process the best.
So Councilor Rosnes, Craig, just so you know that Infor does have a variety of modules, but we have a variety of them shut off because we're not using them, and we've had them shut off. So we've inventoried what we have and what we're using, and which makes our maintenance costs, as you know, go down. So we've done that on that side of things.
Awesome.
So those things that we are not using that have been shut off or we're not being charged for. Correct.
Correct, Joe. So like the business licensing planning module, when they bought that stuff in 2005, we've had stuff turned off for a few years now that we know that the city was going in a different direction than what we were going back in there.
Okay, thank you.
That's great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, anything else on HR? We started the transition in IT, which is next, but I want to make sure we don't skip anything important for Christina. Our one-person HR department.
Nancy Taylor
is now exiting.
Oh, we just lost Nancy.
She'll probably come back. Hopefully.
One suggestion, I didn't want to make too many changes this year, just because this is the way the city has always housed all those liability insurances in HR. Something to consider for the next budget cycle, moving those under Josh, since he really handles kind of whether it's property insurance, liability insurance, auto insurance, and Christina really handling workers' comp, which really falls under HR. It might be something to think about next fiscal year, kind of let's get these under the right and correct program, correct individuals.
All right, let's go on to IT then. Brad, we're on page 58A. You want to hit?
So we mentioned before the big addition was the addition of an IT tech. This is a kind of an entry-level IT position, along with
Unknown participant is now joining.
Along with shuffling folks into broadband, we also looked at our expenses, operating expenses, and reduced some of those to kind of hopefully lessen the blow of the added employee costs. And I think if you can see, I think we're pretty flat from the year prior on our total expense. This is about as, I think, lean as we can run, but I think it's very doable, very feasible. A lot of our work is purely staff driven, so having that extra staff person allows us to do a lot more than we could with just maybe have an extra computer or server or two. So this is a greatly needed position, and one that I think will have a huge impact on staff and just our ability to kind of be a little more proactive on some things. So with that, I guess I have any questions. I'm here to, I can answer any.
Brad, I've got one.
Yep.
I was wondering about line 6308 internet access. Is that your department just paying that fee to Sherwood broadband, or?
I figured that would be a question. The city has always paid Sherwood broadband something for the services, and that line in the past has been under general government.
Okay.
And it shows up in my budget this year, so which is probably where it should.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions for IT? I do want to just one little comment and thank you. I think all of our staff in the city have done an amazing job during COVID and in a variety of ways and adapting. But I want to give special kudos to the IT folks because we really didn't have anyone teleworking or working outside of the city facilities until this happened. And within about a 2-week period, Brad and his mighty team really got folks up and running fairly rapidly, so we could operate and continue to provide services just in a very unique new way. And I know most organizations, public and private, have done that, but he and his staff did a tremendous job, and we did an employee survey recently to kind of just check in how folks were doing and how the process went, and asked a whole variety of questions and got a lot of positive feedback on the amazing job that Brad and IT did in helping us transition. So I just want to mention that publicly.
Here, here. I praise that. Absolutely. Seemed like it was almost seamless, but it was a ton of work for everybody, folks to go collect things and try to figure it out at home, and then IT to support them to make it happen.
Yeah.
And everybody in the leadership to coordinate it all. And stay positive in a very uncertain time. Great job.
We have very patient staff. I will add that.
I give kudos to today because Brad was even doing testing online with me because people weren't able to hear me in meetings. So, he was helping counselors too. Technologically challenged counselors.
Seamless is absolutely a word I would use for this. You guys seem like you just didn't even skip a beat over the last couple months as far as just regular operations, being able to contact you guys. Fantastic work.
Big kudos to my staff.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Okay, I think we're going to now move on to finance, which is starting on page 59, 59A, and yep, that's it.
Yeah, so 59A, and before I get into this, yes, I want to thank Brad and his staff. They got my staff out the door very quickly. And another thing, when it comes to the technology and all this additional money that the city may have been spending, we're still collecting all the costs that have been associated with COVID, but we're going to try to look at getting reimbursed as much money as we can. And that's not even included in the 5-year forecast of, okay, what could that look like? So that's something I'm gathering. That's something I'll provide to the committee, but it's really looking at, okay, as of today, how much have we spent on COVID? And we've only been reimbursed a little under $5,000. So.
Yeah,
okay, so
and we hear stories and hopes and promises at different levels, but until there's a check to deposit or a wire that's transferred in, you can't count on it.
Correct.
Yeah, but I did mention the directors, I would like to start getting this compiled, so if that were to happen, we'd be ready to submit so we can get reimbursed right away. All right, so let's talk a little bit about finances budget. Pretty much I'm proposing just a maintenance level budget. With one caveat, I would like to carry over, last year you folks approved a one-time expenditure for a cost allocation consultant. Just due to COVID, due to this being my first year, haven't been really able to hire a cost consultant come in here to look at how we allocate our costs across departments. And I'd really like to carry that over and add that $10,000 cost allocation, which is included in 6198. I'd like to carry that on over because I think there's a better way that the city could be allocating their costs, charging their costs, and this could potentially keep more money in the general fund. From what I've noticed to see the way things are being charged, sometimes the general fund is incurring 100% of the cost when some of that should probably be allocated out. I do have ideas about fund structure and how we could possibly structure things a little bit differently here. But of course, I want to work with all the department heads to not make things harder on them. But I'm just looking to check how could we keep more money in this general fund. So
that's all I had to hear.
Is that included in the 40,000?
Yes. It's already included in the 40,000. Yes. So if you were to say no, we're not going to fund that, then yeah, drop that down to 30,000.
Hey, David, it's Russell again.
Hi, Russell.
So I'm assuming the 6216 increase is that software we might be looking at. Is that what that is? From 21.6 to 42,000?
That is actually current software we have. So we have Forecast 5 of 8,300, OpenGov of almost $30,000, and some Adobe in there of just about $800. That is all made up of just those three things, which OpenGov, I really want to sit down and talk with Josh to really look at the various components that we don't use in OpenGov. Like I know I've heard the budget committee say before, stories, we don't use that, but we're paying that cost. Can we get that shut off? Even though we're under contract, are we able to get out of that contract? And that's some stuff I would like to look at, just saving dollars here and there.
So how did we just get that the last fiscal year? Because that's a jump of $20,000.
And those are some of those modules that Katie asked us for.
Yeah, one of those was the budget module that I believe was more recently, and that is a $21,000 price tag. Just to add budget module. Because that module is supposed to be able to spit out this budget book, we've heard. There's still some things I need to learn because one city in the state of Oregon where they were able to spit out their budget book, and they go for the GFOA award, and they receive their award. So it could save time and money. There's some things I need to learn about the product, though.
All right, thank you.
That's really expensive for what they do. Just a comment, having worked in that industry.
Yeah. That was my thought, too.
Yeah.
Any other questions on finance?
I think one of the things I told David recently, he's only been here less than a year. The format of the budget, he's learned a lot in that first that less than the first year, but the format and how the budget's structured, he's now been through one budget cycle or almost through. As he puts his own kind of footprint on the budget process and changes things, this could change over time. And that includes looking at some of these tools that came on board with Katie and seeing if we really need to use those. And then COVID happened. And so there's some things that need to get addressed that hopefully he'll have some time after this budget and before. When is the auditors coming? Do you know yet? Or
yeah, they're coming for interim, what we call interim field work. I know Katie's very familiar with this subject, but they're coming out to do basically pre-testing at the end of July, and then they'll come back in the month of November. So
okay,
but no, there's some time, and I told Joe the first year I'm not going to make a lot of changes, and I don't want to ruffle feathers. Of course, I believe in co-production with all the senior leadership, but you know, there's some things I've looked at that I'd like to do a little bit differently, but I don't want to add confusion or heartache on other staff and you know, their time. So just stuff I'll have to sit down and talk with individuals about.
David, one more question.
Yes.
On the audit line, it went down this year and it goes back up next year, and it's pretty well consistent the other years. What's the difference?
Well, I need to thank Leslie Dean. She is the accounting supervisor, and she's probably on the phone down here somewhere. I can't see her, but she noticed the last it was either 2 to 3 years that our accounting firm, TKW, was charging us for a federal audit, and we didn't have the federal awards that require a federal audit, so we were being overcharged. So we received a refund.
Oh, cool.
And it was about a $12,000 to $15,000 refund. So that was Leslie doing a great job going through the contracts and really looking through things, and she noticed that error.
Good job, Leslie.
Yeah, that's great job. So, David, one more question. Or at least for me on this one, fiscal year FY 19-20 for the software subscriptions of $21,000. Is that what we're paying for all of our finance and payroll systems?
Yes, it was a little odd the way things were budgeted. I found that, for example, yes, that's where the software subscriptions are. And I did find that, for example, in prior years, 5CAS was budgeted in multiple line items. I saw $8,300 in a couple various line items, but yeah, the software subscription is for OpenGov, Adobe, and 5CAS. That's how
it's collapsed.
It's all collapsed. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm trying to collapse them into the right line item just to make it more consistent with where they should be.
Okay. Thanks.
You want to cover court, which is the next page?
Yes, I can cover courts. Pretty much maintenance level budget, with the exception you'll see that we originally adopted about $2 million in fines from all of our cameras. I projected that from when I originally sent that out to council probably about a month ago. I projected a little over 2.3 million we're going to receive, but then Joe found out a few weeks ago that our cameras over there on Sunset are getting shut down for a month. And so I brought those projections down and kind of tapered those projections really to the COVID situation that was going on. You hear, well, when we get to talking about gas taxes, you have carbon emissions going down around 50%. You have less traffic, less folks buying gas. That was dropping by 40%. So I made sure to calculate in about a 40% drop, but I did it as a 20% because you got to remember a lot of those tickets are double the fine right now because they're in a work zone. Or it would have been a 40% drop, but I only calculated 20%. And luckily during the month of April, my projections were within a few $1,000s. So I think we'll be fine reaching that 2.1 million. Now, the reason why it goes up so much higher in fiscal year 2021 is because we're looking to turn on the southbound speed cameras. And that was pretty interesting. The company Redflex, they conducted a study, and I believe it was 894 speed infractions a month on average going southbound. So that's why you see a jump up in city or in traffic lines.
So Councilor Scott, that's your project there.
I think that was Councilor Young, wasn't it?
Oh, I
Might
think
have been both.
both Doug and I were kind of hammering on
Can we
that.
get a commission?
I think that's real. I think that's going to be really important, though, because with the school opening in September, our goal is to get people to slow down. We need them slowing down in both directions. So
Yeah. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you just added
Wherever it is a danger, we need to alter behavior.
Yes.
I just can't believe there were 900 infractions, so like over 30 a day. Oh my gosh. And that's going south.
And it's even worse coming north.
Yeah.
Wow.
So our percentage of tickets for city residents may go up a little bit just because there's more city residents going that direction. So,
Well, they should know better.
yeah.
And the offset to that, you're going to see a little bit of a tick up in how much we pay for the monthly services in 6112 for the photo red light services. I think that additional camera costs. Chief, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's additional $2,500 a month. That's why you'll see a little bit of a jump. We budgeted $248,000, projected only to spend $231,000. That's because we're getting credits for when the cameras have gone down. By just extending our contract with them on the back end, they'll credit us the time that these cameras are down to.
So, and just, this is Tim again, and Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, but for the benefit of anyone who might be listening out on YouTube, that might sound like an awful lot for a camera, but that also covers all of the operational costs, the software, and they are doing the initial review of the video and filtering it down to actual actionable video that then goes to our police department. Is that correct, Chief?
That is correct. And they're also doing all the maintenance. We do not incur one dime of maintenance costs no matter what happens. So camera breaks down, a tree limb hits it, somebody leaves the roadway, takes the pole out, doesn't matter what happens. We never have to pay for any of that.
Thank you.
And David, you're correct on your cost.
Any other questions on court?
Well, my only question about the 1 month camera outage is that seems to contradict what I was told fairly recently, that there wasn't going to be a camera outage, and it flip-flopped from what we were originally told. So it may be outside the scope of budget, but it was interesting to me.
And that was interesting because I remember that we were all discussing the red light camera. I think it was mid-April, but then I believe you found out in May that it was going to be going down.
Yeah, I found out in very early May, and actually I need to check back. They should be coming back on if they're not already on already. So
yeah, and we found out, I think it was a few days before they were going down, that the cameras are going to be down.
Which at one point we were told they weren't going to be down. So
Who is the they? Are we talking about Redflex or ODOT or who?
the county, it's part of the county project. So
As in
that whole intersection is being done by Washington County and their contractors.
Why is it, okay, got it, thanks.
Yeah, check in with Joe offline.
Yeah.
Okay. More of the specifics. It's a done deal. Not happy about it, and I'm at the front of that line, but
Happy to talk offline, more detail, Councilor Griffin. All right, I think that is all of admin.
That is all admin. Community services.
So, Kristen, this is your section.
And I know we're going to jump back a little bit in the book. It looks like community services is going to start on page 68A. That's kind of where that begins. And I will turn it over to Kristen.
Thank you. So I am going to plan on leaving my camera off. I apologize ahead of time, but I seem to start having issues with the internet if I have my camera on, and I'm hoping to get through the presentation without losing everybody or losing me. So that's why I have my camera off. So we're going to start with Community Services Management, and again, that's page 68A. There's really not too much to that Department 55. It's really just myself and some of Kelsey's time. So that's the one section within Community Services that you're not going to see too many changes from what was projected and what's proposed. The other sections, we have more changes due to COVID. Are there any specific questions on that section 55? Okay, we will move on then. So the next section, we are going to turn to library, which is page 69A. And Adrienne is not with us this evening. Usually she's able to join us and participate in the budget meetings, but she is not here tonight. But Jenny Swanson is on the line. And once I kind of go through some of the projections and what we're looking out for next year, Jenny is available to answer any questions that any of you might have. So as everybody probably already knows, the Sherwood Library the majority of the library is funded through WCCLS, and that covers about 34% of our funding, or excuse me, yeah, 3/4 of our funding. And from the county, the majority of that comes from their general fund, and then a portion of that also comes from the levy. And as everybody probably already knows, this last Tuesday, the levy was passed, the WCCLS levy, and that passed at a rate of 68.4%. So thank you to everybody who voted for that. Adrienne wanted me to make sure to pass along her thanks and appreciation, and especially to council for supporting it through a resolution. So that levy will not take effect until fiscal year 21-22. So next year's budget is still part of the current operating levy, which is a 5-year operating levy. So we have some time before that takes into effect, but they wanted to leave some time to go back to voters in case it did not pass. The other thing that you might notice on this budget is there's some areas where our projections are a little bit higher, and some of that is because of the Pool 2 funds. Those of you who have been through this process before know that oftentimes we receive money later on in the year from WCCLS, and that's Pool 2 funds. This year we received $25,000 in Pool 2 funds, and it was scattered throughout a few different line items depending on what we did with the funding. The other thing that you're going to notice is on revenue, fines are down, and that trend started a few years ago when we stopped collecting fines for juvenile materials and young adults, and children's materials. So there was already a decrease there, and then with COVID, that has been even more impacted. So currently, people are not able to return materials to books, so therefore, we're not charging people for not being able to return their materials, and we're going to have a decrease of fines even more so there. Looking at a few specific line items, 6190.
Are we not processing books that get dropped off?
We are not. We actually have the book drops closed, so you cannot return any materials right now at any library. Right now, Jenny, you're going to have to remind me of the number, but it was something crazy like 11,000 materials that are out.
So we'll just have a big stack in the library with no room for them if we did.
Correct.
I got you.
And one of the things is when we do start collecting materials, we have to have a way to store them. There's a whole process. So we need to be able to set them aside for probably 72 hours and then make sure that they're not contaminated and then have the staff to process the materials. So even when we do open the book drops back up, we're going to have to work through all that material and get everything processed.
Do we need to order another book bin for that thing?
We are working on a plan. We actually are probably going to end up, we're working on a plan, and Public Works is helping us as well, making sure we have a place to store some of that material while we're waiting for that 72 hours. And we're trying as much as possible to stay consistent with WCCLS so that when we do open up the book drop, all of the libraries are opening them up around the same time so that people don't all start coming to our library to drop off their material. Okay, so now we're going to move down to line item 6198, and that's professional technical services. And you'll notice that we had actually adjusted that number a little bit through a supplemental budget, and that's where Pool 2 funds were. That's why there was a significant jump from last fiscal year to the current fiscal year of what was adopted. We did a supplemental budget and had changed that. We're not going to be able to spend all of that money due to COVID, so our projection is actually quite a bit lower, and then it evens out next year. In 6216, that's the software subscriptions, and you'll see quite a bump from this year to next year, and that is for our self-checkout machine. We actually have ordered another self-checkout machine. There'll be one in the children's area, so that subscription will cover that machine. And then if you go to 7051, it's the very last line item. That's office equipment, and that's the machine itself. That's what the $17,000 is for. And just to note, we already have 2 self-checkout machines, and that's something that's we're gonna need to replace in the next couple of years. So that'll be a charge we're trying to do one every year or spread that out over the next couple of years so that we don't feel that increase all at once. Are there any questions? As I mentioned, you'll see line items where we did adjust our projections because of the closure. The library has been closed since March 13th. That doesn't really impact revenues for the library except for fines. What it does impact is what we've been able to spend and what we've been able to accomplish. No questions?
No, looks good. Thank you.
Thank you. So moving on, the next section within community services is the field house. And the field house has also been closed since I believe it's March 15th. And the biggest change that you're going to see there is on the revenue side of things. One thing that I did want to point out is we had submitted some changes just a couple weeks ago to our projections for next year for the proposed budget to revenue. We had actually decreased that by about 20%, and those changes were missed. So we are going to make some adjustments. The total revenue that we are proposing to bring in next year is $101,680. So it'll be an 80% decrease. But with the governor's orders of no contact sports, we don't see being able to open up the field house for a few months. So we hope that we're able to make that up, but we want to be realistic. And that is about it. The other significant change you see in there is not just for the leagues, but also for the facility rentals. But as I mentioned, overall, it's about 20% that we're projecting to change. Any questions on Fieldhouse?
Not on Fieldhouse, maybe more of a bigger issue related to Fieldhouse, and maybe more for Joe. Joe, in the overall budget, did we account for the changes the schools district is asking for with the IGA for how we schedule all the fields and everything?
No.
Okay.
So
Good.
This is based on the way we have been operating for years. We did not adjust the budget based on ongoing negotiations. So.
Okay. Good. That's what I was hoping you'd say.
So moving on to the next page, Department 54, which is 70B. This is recreation, sports, and leagues. Same applies here, of course, as well, Tim. This is where you would have seen those changes. Facility use fees, though, are down significantly for the rest of this fiscal year, and that's due to COVID closures. You'll see that the player fees, we're projecting only bringing in almost $50,000, as opposed to we had adopted and thought we would bring in 78. And that's because we're not collecting player fees for any of those spring sports that are happening right now. And then also there's an impact with facility rentals. We're not sure what that impact is going to be for next fiscal year. We think that we'll be able to hopefully get everybody back on board and playing in the fall. If that doesn't happen, there will be a decrease there. For example, if there's an impact from football.
So your assumption is they'll be able to start using the fields again in the fall, based
Correct.
on these numbers. Okay.
Correct.
And that would be one of those, in 4 to 6 months, we know more than what we know now. We may have to make adjustments. So.
Yeah.
Any questions to that page?
No, it looks good. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to events and volunteers, and that's page 71A. So once again, the impacts that we're seeing here are due to COVID, the biggest being that we did cancel our Music on the Green concert series this summer. So probably even more than what you're seeing here, we're in the process of needing to refund sponsors who had already paid for this summer. So there may be even more tweaks and changes down the road here. But then on the other side, of course, we're not going to be paying bands. And we didn't have all of that information when we were putting the budget together, even just a few weeks ago, that we were indeed going to be canceling. But that will have an impact. We won't be paying the bands. We won't be paying for the sound. But then we also won't be bringing in our sponsor support. And the main events impacted would be movies in the park and Music on the Green. Music on the Green, of course, is a lot more expensive to put on and has a much larger impact. Any questions there?
I had a question.
Sure.
On the salaries, what we projected for this year, it's almost going down to half and then back up. Was there a staffing change somewhere this year?
Yeah, would you like me to answer that, Kristen?
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, what was interesting, you look at the way it was budgeted, $63,000, but look at the past trend. You're down in the $44,000, $39,000 range. That popped out to me too. So I went through and double checked that, and those projections look correct. I'm not sure how or why it was budgeted so high.
But then we're budgeting it back up again?
Yeah, and this is based off the way, folks, early on in the budget process, folks let me know how folks are going to be allocated out. And I can give you specific detail, but let's say for myself, I say, you know what, I'm going to spend 25% in the general fund and 25% in the water fund and 50% in another fund. Well, what if it doesn't work out that way? Then if you start charging your time differently than how you were originally allocated, you're going to start throwing numbers off. But I will look into that for you.
Thanks.
Yeah, it does.
Any other questions on Department 53, events and volunteers?
Is that? I'm sorry, I can't help myself. David, your answer there. So I'm assuming a lot of those hours are hourly, not hourly, and that's why there's fluctuation. Is that what I was hearing?
No, even salary folks, they can allocate their time out across multiple different programs, and I believe, Kristen, correct me if I'm wrong, in this program too, you have volunteers that we're not using, so we're not paying their salary and so forth.
Well, I think there will be an impact. I'm not sure how big it will be, but for example, Leah codes all of her time to Music on the Green and summer events. So during the summer months, she spends quite a bit of time on special events and is charging to this budget, but this year that will all be charged to the Arts Center, so that will look a little bit different. We also have seasonals that end up charging their time to the special events, and so that would show up here as well. Other than that, I see that it's clearly a pretty big up and down. I'm not sure why it's coming in that way. That's not numbers that we pull or put together. I'm not sure.
So we will bring back some more detail on that next week.
Yeah, I'll get some more detail for you folks.
Okay, moving on to the Art Center, which is page 72A. And Shanda is on the line if we have any specific questions. This is another area that has been greatly impacted by COVID. Obviously, we haven't been able to have any facility rentals or large events in the at the Art Center, so that is impacting both our projections for this fiscal year and what we're looking at for next fiscal year, knowing that we're going to have a slow start over the summer months. Not sure when we're going to be able to have those larger groups back in the facility, so we've made some adjustments because of that. We do plan on offering, just so everybody knows, summer daycare programs starting the last week in June, the beginning of July. So we hope to bring in some class revenue and not just be completely flat for this spring. And then also, of course, give an opportunity for kids in the community to get out and participate in some of our art camps and art programs. Yeah.
Kristen, this is Tim. I have a question on the revenue side. So even with, so in the projected 1920 was 115 for facility rental, and you're going up to 120. Is that even, you mentioned that you kind of adjusted because of COVID and not being able to rent out in the summer. Are you just expecting that to roar back, or am I missing something?
I believe, and Shanda, please step in and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that is our adjusted projection. We had originally had even higher in there. So we still anticipate that we're going to continue to increase revenue. Just originally we thought we'd be much higher than is showing.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
That is our
I can confirm. I just pulled up the document. Yeah, these are updated projected numbers. So,
okay.
And does that include both churches? Because you had 2 churches in there.
Yes.
Okay.
And then the one item line that I wanted to point out is professional technical services. 6198 you'll see is higher for projected and again for proposed, and that is where we pay all of our instructors out of. So as we hold classes and programs, instructors work for us on a contracted basis. So if we're bringing in the revenue, that's where we're paying the instructors out of. We also have been doing all of our facility maintenance, larger maintenance and repairs of electronic equipment, lights, sound, those types of things out of that line item, and we're actually going to be breaking that out in the future and moving that down because we really need to track that differently. So you'll also see a line item towards the end that is new for us, 6598. I guess it's not new. We had $1,000 in there this year, but we're bumping it up to $5,000 next year to help pay for some of that. Just ongoing maintenance of some of that equipment to make sure things are working properly. Any other questions on the Art Center?
Yeah, so sorry, this is Tommy Sherwood. I'm new, so I apologize for this question. Where the fiscal year 2019-2020, the income loss, is that going to be pretty accurate? And then just wondering, where does that income loss, what budget did that come out of overall? The general budget?
Which line item are you looking at? I apologize.
Just the total income loss of 179,000, if I'm reading it right.
Yeah, so a lot of these departments in the general fund, of course, they're funded by the general fund. So a portion of their costs are not allocated out to other departments. More the internal service funds, whether that's IT, finance, HR, we're allocated out because we're providing, whether it's accounting services, HR services. But yeah, a lot of these departments there's a portion of their budget that's funded by general fund dollars, because in the general fund is where all the property taxes are collected, where the franchise fees are collected, some state shared revenue. So,
okay, thank you.
Oh, and I just want to say, howdy, neighbor.
Howdy. Keep it down over there.
And people didn't believe me. They thought I put a typo when I put Thomas Sherwood. They thought I misspelled your last name.
Are there any other questions on Art Center? Okay, we will move on to the Senior Center then, which is 73A, page 73A. And Maya, I believe, is on the line as well. So if we have any questions specific for the Senior Center, we can definitely have her weigh in. I will say that they've remained very active, just had to shift and bob and weave through all of this COVID stuff. We now have over 70 seniors who are signed up and receiving meals on a daily basis, or Monday through Friday, I should say. So we are doing that through a combination of delivery or having people pick up meals. So though the program looks very different, they are keeping pretty busy during this COVID period. And also, and I should mention that all of the departments have been doing online programming as well. So that's occurred at the library and at the Art Center as well. Difficult to do at the field house. But at the Senior Center, they're also doing some online programs. So we actually don't see quite as large of an impact, especially for the meals. We actually are on track revenue-wise for that line item area. The impact that we're seeing is on facility rentals. We're not renting out the facility right now. We had a church in there on a weekly basis. Obviously, they're not able to come in. And we're not sure what that's going to look like for next year. We don't know when we're going to be able to open the doors back up to the Senior Center. We see it staying closed, most likely longer than our other facilities. So there's really not too many adjustments to this budget, but I'd be happy to answer any questions, or like I said, Maya's on the phone as well.
What are they charging us for bank fees?
Well, that is a good question. Maya, do you know off the top of your head?
What was the question?
What are the charges for bank fees?
You know, that it's not something that I know. That's the accounting department. They do the bank fees.
So David stepped out. David just stepped out. He can answer that when he gets back.
Oh.
Joe, I believe that bank fees are the charges associated with the credit card machine.
Yep.
Ooh.
So do you take credit
I'm
cards?
sorry, I thought the question was like what percentage. But yeah, anytime that we take the card, use the card for either a lunch or a facility rental, if someone's paying that way, it's a percentage that we pay to the bank.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
So Maya, do you take credit cards for any services over there?
We do. We take credit cards for any service that we offer that has a fee attached.
That's what that's for.
Have we considered having a cash discount fee, or a premium add-on for credit card, for use of credit cards, especially for like facility rentals? I mean, obviously, someone buying a snack it's a convenience issue. If someone's paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for a facility rental and we're paying 3% off the top, instead of them, that seems like an area where we could improve.
Yes, it is an area we can improve.
I believe that Visa and MasterCard don't allow convenience fees like that, with the exception of very few exceptions.
Yeah. I wasn't saying we would build it into I would say we build it into our pricing would be X, and we discount it 3% if you pay by cash.
Yeah.
Or check, right? More that way, not through the process itself.
Yeah. It's a good suggestion.
And something that, I stepped out for a few minutes, something that Brad brought up, because once broadband is starting to get up and going, we're going to be starting to collect the broadband fees. There might be an option for us to piggyback off the state's contract with the company and see what their rates are too. So we're going to look at a bunch of different options, whether it's a banking RFP, see if we can use their terminals to get cheaper rates. But that's one area I'd like to see if we could save the city some money.
I would even throw in your utility bills into that. If you can get that volume up, you can save a lot of money.
Yep.
Yeah.
Any questions regarding senior center or for Maya?
I don't have a question, but I just want to say you guys are rocking it over there, and I really appreciate all the hard work during COVID and getting the meals out to the seniors. It's just been awesome.
Thank you.
Here.
I agree.
Everybody's doing great.
You've been working hard, but having a good
citywide,
time.
but to be up to 70 plus daily lunches, weekday lunches, that's awesome.
So before moving on, it's a little bit after 8 o'clock. We usually do 9 o'clock-ish to finish. Does anyone need a quick break? We'd like to keep powering through the general fund if possible.
Maybe just a couple minutes.
That's fine. If people want to take a quick
Take
break.
5.
What was that?
Take 5.
Yep.
Back at 8:15.
Sure.
That sounds
Tried
good.
it. And if we can do it at 3, make it in 3, that's even better. But yeah.
So Julia, you're ready. You're going to be next in community development.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. I'm seeing if everyone's back. Is everyone generally back?
I don't think anybody physically I mean, they didn't log out, so it's hard to tell if they're back.
Let's just get her done.
Okay.
We're beyond 5 minutes, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
You snooze, you lose.
So I am on page 61A, and that's the CDD management. Community development, as you recall, is comprised of community development management, planning, building, engineering, economic development, and code compliance. Under CDD management is me, the economic development manager. And then I guess I'm saying this to point out that you will probably notice, if you have not already noticed, the personal services in this budget or this department is significantly projected to be significantly more than we budgeted. And I believe that is more of a coding issue than, we certainly don't have any additional staff in community development. But planners are spending time supporting Bruce's, for example. They're charging it to this department, as well as Natasha, our admin, too. She is doing a lot to support Bruce in all of the economic development materials and proposals and things like that he's sending out. And then also code compliance, if it doesn't fit neatly into planning or building, he'll charge his time to CDD management as well. So that's why that looks like it's a lot more, but it's made up for in the other departments that aren't getting those charges. I wanted to just point out 6198, we're budgeting money for next year under other professional and technical services in the event that we choose to proceed with an urban renewal area plan. We're currently doing feasibility study, exploring the possibility. And so we've got money budgeted there. I'll also point out that under 6209, travel and training, we have spent quite a bit, or projected to spend quite a bit more than we budgeted, and then we've budgeted quite a bit more next year compared to this year. And that's just because we really didn't anticipate, we didn't budget for economic development manager and all the different seminars and meetings and networking events and conferences that he goes to and that are really critical, a critical component of his job. So I guess the good thing is with COVID, that slowed down significantly. So we haven't had anything the past several months and through the rest of this fiscal year, but we're projecting about 5,100 next fiscal year for travel and training. And the only other thing I'll point out in this department, unless there are questions, is just highlighting the community support and promotion of $200,000. It actually says it was adopted, but that was adopted in the supplemental budget. It wasn't adopted last year. That was for the emergency grant program that we did for businesses to help support them in the early phases of COVID.
We will be seeking reimbursement, and we believe we will be reimbursed through the CARES Act.
Any questions on Department 33 CDD management? Hearing none, I will move on to planning. I guess I want to address the.
What page are you on? What page? I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, 62A.
62A.
I'll address this, and it really applies to all three: planning, building, and engineering. Kristen was talking about adjustments to revenue projections based on COVID, and we are not seeing any reduction right now. In fact, as you can see in our projected numbers across the board, we are bringing in or have brought in more than we budgeted, and we expect to do similar next fiscal year. There's a lot of development still happening in the Brookman area. We're seeing a lot of interest and real actual happening right now, stuff going on in the Tonkin employment area, and then Bruce is bringing in additional people. So we anticipate that there will be additional applications in there. And so it may look surprising to see our proposed revenue in all categories, but I'm right now talking about planning being so much higher than we adopted this year. But we are feeling pretty confident that those are going to be good and close. Everybody is sort of talking about the economy and possible recession, but we're kind of hearing it's probably not going to be a super long one. And I think the development community, at least to this point, seems to not be scared about that. So,
are we forecasting a drop off in other types of permits?
No. The only thing in business licenses, we brought in, we're projecting 79,000 and we kept it at 75,000, which is what we had been kind of projecting this year. And we think that just because we don't know what's going to happen with businesses and business licenses, that's a little bit of a drop, but we're not projecting any significant change in these permits.
Julia, why was there 2 years that we didn't have any money?
For business licenses, we did. It was just in a different department. It's kind of gone back and forth. It was in planning, and then it was back in finance, and then planning took it over again. So it's been there. It just hasn't been there in the planning budget.
Got it.
Yeah. I'm on page 62B now. Other professional and technical services, we're budgeting $260,000. That will help us finish out the comprehensive plan. And then we're also applying for a grant, which we expect to get. We'll find out hopefully soon whether or not we got it for a relook at Sherwood West. And that would be helping to fund that, as well as some money for on-call planning services. Right now we have the limited duration planner that's helping out quite a bit in the current planning realm, as well as Erica and Joy doing a little bit of current planning. But if we have a huge uptick at one time, we'll have to utilize those on-call services to kind of help and make sure that we're staying within our 120-day time requirements. Travel and training, we're projecting it for this fiscal year to go down. We had budgeted $5,500. We're projecting to stay at $1,600 because we didn't spend it before COVID happened, and then there was nothing happening. And then we're budgeting about $2,850 for next fiscal year. That is kind of all I wanted to just highlight for you with planning, but I'm happy to answer any questions on that. Hearing none.
Keep up the good work.
I will.
Busy is good.
Yes. Yeah. Moving on to building, which is on page 63A. Once again, we are projecting. We're projecting to be quite a bit higher this year than we had anticipated, and then similar, not quite as high as we actually came in this year, but similarly high for next fiscal year as far as revenues at $404,000. The personal services are pretty much the same. Again, some of that is related to coding and kind of where staff are charging their time. Building plan review looks like it's down. I'm sorry, I'm on line item 6113 building plan review. That is budgeted for our contract plan reviewer that does commercial and industrial plan reviews of a certain type and size. What you see from fiscal year 18-19 is primarily the school. He charges a percentage of the plan review fee. And so if we have and the plan review fees are based on the value of the project. So if we have a high value project, it's a high value plan review fee, and he gets a high value check. So in prior years, it was higher. This year we budgeted $100,000, but we didn't have as many of those types of plan reviews that needed to be done, and so we're projecting $65,000. And then for next fiscal year, we're projecting $50,000 because our building official can do residential plan reviews and a lot of tenant improvements of a certain size. So that's kind of why we're projecting that. Obviously, if we see things drastically different, we'll have to do a supplemental budget. But that's what the plan is.
And this would have been the line item that would have been effective if our state legislator had passed that rule that we can't use contractors.
Yes.
For that, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
One of the silver linings for them not getting anything done this year.
Right.
This year. Correct.
That's all I identified to highlight for you for building. But again, unless you guys have questions, and I'm happy to answer them for you. Oh, I will point out under the bank fees on the next page, 63B, that is line item 6215. We are over what we budgeted. We were hoping to, we adopted the budget at 6,000. Right now we're projecting to be about 9,000. And that's really, again, it's credit card fees. We, several years ago, made a policy decision that we do not collect system development charges we do not allow people to pay their SDCs via credit card, so that we're not, so we're not subsidizing their vacation points with any of the dedicated funds, but building fees still are able to be paid by the credit card. And so it's just, we just happen to have a lot of people paying their building permits by credit cards. So
I would echo my comments from before about rentals in this regard.
Yes. Yep. I agree. Because when you add it all up, it's quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. And builders love those air miles. They love paying with credit card.
Well,
hey, Julia.
Yes.
Hi, Julia, this is Nancy Taylor. I have a question about code compliance. Where does code compliance charge a fee if there's a
Katie tell you about that?
problem with the code? And if there is, where is that put in the budget? And how do we know the number of problems per year?
So he... I guess in short, no. I mean, yes, there is the ability to issue fines or citations, but that's not the purpose of that role. It's to get compliance. And so he keeps a log of all the complaints and where it's at and the resolution. So I could certainly get you the number. But it's usually what happens is he identifies the problem, works with the property owner, to comply, and then that's it. If we had a situation where someone just refused or it was an egregious issue, we do have the ability in our code to issue a fine or a citation, but I'm not aware of us having done that in quite some time. So it's not budgeted.
What about things like zombie cars? Does he identify a zombie car? Does he write a
I think that's handled by the police department. He does municipal code, private property. The police pretty much deals with cars.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yes. Any other questions about the building?
I have a wider question on credit card fees. Are we, and maybe this is for David, do we have one? Are all of our merchant agreements kind of divided by department now, or do we have one merchant agreement?
I've heard rumor there's multiple merchant agreements.
Okay.
That's why we need to fix it. Yeah, and that's something that should be fixed. If we could get under one merchant agreement, probably get a discounted fee.
I used to be on the selling side of those systems, so if you ever want to pick my brain on how to leverage the best deal, let me know.
Sounds good. You'll be my consultant. No.
No.
I know.
Yeah, it's gonna be.
There's some free pro bono advice. Yeah.
All right. If the price is right, we all get paid the same.
That's right.
Nada.
All right, engineering.
All right, last but not least for me, engineering, I'll just point out, once again, we're projecting our revenues will be higher next year than we adopted this year, and they are projected to be higher this year than we adopted this year. In part, some of that is development that happened sooner than we thought. So the engineering department charges, the bulk of their fee is the plan review and the project inspection fees. And that also is based on a certain percentage of the cost, the project cost of the public improvements. So projects that are building a lot of public roads or facilities are going to get a lot more revenue than something that is a tenant improvement. I mean, they're not going to get any engineering revenue. And so we've seen quite a few subdivisions this year, and we are also projecting several subdivisions in the Brookman area next year, as well as development within the Tonkin employment area. So that's a pretty large number, but we expect that to be fairly accurate. And then that number, I'll also point out, if you look at the personal services, again, it looks like we're seeing an increase in people, but really what it is it's an increase in engineering time being charged to the general fund, and that's the reflection of them doing more work on these private development projects. They're also doing capital improvement projects, but because of the amount of private development that we anticipate, there's going to be a lot of engineering time spent on that as well. The only other thing that I had highlighted to point out is just under office supplies, 6401, that's a little bit of an increase, almost double. We've got some chairs for several staff that need to be replaced, as well as engineering requires special and larger monitors, and we're getting some computer upgrades, and so they need to purchase those. That's all I have for engineering. Questions?
Good job.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That's awesome.
All right, Chief Grove, Public Safety, you're up.
All right, hi everyone, again. I've also got Captain Ty Hanlon on the line in case somebody does stump the chief, but we'll see if that happens or not. I know Council President Rosner's going to try, but so obviously you know about the two positions that are in our budget. So notwithstanding those, it's a pretty standard budget. There's no other significant equipment increases or anything. So I'm just going to kind of let you peruse and ask any questions that you have about our budget.
Chief, could you talk a little bit about kind of the history of the amount of police we've had over the years and why we need 2 more officers?
Sure. So that really goes back several years. There's been a desire, and as I said last year in these meetings, an interest and a desire on the part of this committee and previous budget committees to add staffing, but there has not been the ability to do so. And so we really found ourselves in a position where we were starting to slip behind the growth of the community. And there's a couple charts in your budget book, one that shows the population. So if you look at how the population growth is tracked over the last several years, it hasn't been as significant as it was back in the like 2003 and back in 2004. But the community does continue to grow. And then under our department sheets, you'll see the police activities chart, which shows that we continue to get busier. So those are just two of the metrics that play into that. Some of the other things that were considered were just the types of services that we were not able to provide that, in my opinion, a functioning police department does provide, either at a basic level or a more complete level. So we operated with one investigator for several years, which just was not sufficient. We've operated with one SRO for several years, and our school system has continued to grow beyond that level of service. Our patrol schedule has not kept pace and has not held the strength that it needs to provide enough people on any given day that would be working the road so that we could absorb sick time or any other different things like that. So I'll kind of pause there. There was a lot of information that we went through with the staffing study several years ago, and lots of analysis that we've done in response to that, several work sessions that we've had with council. So I think that's probably a good recap. So what the staffing plan does is catch us up to where I believe we need to be and start to prepare us for where I think we need to be for the future as the growth continues. Certainly there's no end in sight with Brookman getting developed. Tonquin employment, of course, is going to have a different impact than population, but it's still going to require police services. And then we always have to remember that around the corner at some point, whether it's 2 years or 10 years, and obviously it's going to be closer to the latter, but we still have Sherwood West coming. So if we're not able to keep pace with where we need to now, when that future hits, we're really going to be potentially in a bad way. So what we get from a safety perspective today was paid for decades ago. So the investment reaps benefits over the course of time as opposed to year to year. So that's why it's important to continue the investment. So I'll stop there.
It's cheaper to stay ahead of it than it is to get behind and try to catch up.
Yeah, a lot of communities, once they get behind, they just won't catch up. I mean, there's those kinds of examples all over the region, all over the state, and certainly all over the nation.
So I had a question, Chief. This is Councilor Young. So originally in the staffing study, and I know it wasn't set in stone that we had hoped to possibly have a second SRO this year. So being that we in the budget are saying 2 more officers for patrol, if some more positive conversations can come with the school district, we can always shift that at some point, right? We could turn one into an SRO type thing, or?
Yes, Counselor. So in fact, I have not been comfortable with putting labels on positions, but the reality is when you talk about positions, people want to know, well, what does that mean? And what are some things we can do? And so as a result, we start to kind of identify what those services may look like. And we may say, well, we'll add a second detective, we'll add a second SRO, we'll do this, we'll do that. When in reality, that's just not predictable because we don't know what our staffing is going to do. We may hire 2 and lose 1. I mean, you just have to, reality is not always predictable. So that being said, our intention is to bolster our school policing, absolutely. And we're just going to have to continue to revisit that and try to have good, productive conversations with our partners at the school district and be patient because, frankly, they've got a lot going on right now. As if a huge construction project was not enough, they of course have to deal with COVID as well. So we'll continue those conversations, look forward to those conversations. We absolutely, in my opinion, as your police chief, need at least 1 more SRO, and I think we could use 2 more SROs and keep them busy immediately. There's just too many things too many opportunities with our young people that we're missing out on.
So the bottom line, just to be clear, is this budget would support the addition of an additional SRO as early as this fall, should we want to do that and have the partnership to do that.
Yes.
Thank you.
I mean, the way you look at this staffing plan, Councilor Scott, it becomes about numbers spaced out over the course of a specified time, and those numbers don't change. Where those people end up and the assignments they end up certainly could change. And as you alluded to earlier, I have the discretion as your chief to make adjustments where I need to as in response to what happens. But certainly one of my priorities is to get another body in the schools for sure.
Craig?
Excellent, thank you.
Craig, 6298?
Yes, Paul.
It's a big increase there.
There is, so that's a shift. So we shifted a couple things that were in other lines and shifted them into that line, namely our agreement that we have with Axon, who provides our body-worn cameras, our taser devices, and our cloud evidence storage. And then the other would be Lexipol, which is the agency that we have our policy manual through. So those came from 6216 and 6398 respectively, and we moved them into 6298. So that's why that shows that bump.
And Chief, the bump in the travel training 6209, is that in anticipation of training new officers partly?
Yes, partly. So if you look at it looks pretty shocking when you look at the 1920 projected. And the 1920 projected is a reality of where we're at right now. So training, obviously 3 months ago, training came to a screeching halt, as did everything else. And so that line is going to carry forward some money. But if you look at previous lines, we're right around, 32, 39 at almost 40 at one point. So there's some increase there for the new officers. There's also some increase there for some conferences. Includes a conference that we go to every other year or every couple of years, the IACP conference. For just out of fiscal responsibility, we don't go to that one every year because it's expensive. So we try to limit that to every other year. And in fact, so we would have been due to go this fall, but decided even before COVID to not go this fall. And so that's budgeted then for next fall. And I'm talking about the IACP, International Association of Chiefs of Police Training Conference.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
One more question.
Go ahead.
The crime stats, are those on the police website?
No, but I can certainly get just about anything that you'd like to see. The challenge with the crime statistics is that one really good clearinghouse to go to is the FBI, but they post what is shared with them. So one problem that we had, there's a gap, I think, in 2017 because when the region system was brand new and we were a member of that, there was some uniform crime reporting hiccups, and so all the data didn't get submitted. So I'm not sure if that's been repaired yet or not. So we're on a different RMS now, and we're reporting our data, or our provider is reporting our data to the state. So it's getting reported now. But then the other source is just through our record system. So we can pull it from there as well. Was there anything specific you were curious about, Paul?
No, I'd just like to see, maybe over a 3-year period, if there's, I see on the page 66, it looks like everything's down, but, or the calls for services, but I'd like to see some kind of stats, where it's going, if we're having an increase in one area or another.
So let's look at that chart really quick on page 66 that you referred to. So 2018 was the highest year on record. It just absolutely was a crazy busy year, and I don't have an explanation why. But if you take away the few hundred activities on 2018 and were to bring it back down into normal, you would find a consistent increase 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, because 19, if you compare 19 to 2017, you'll see that it keeps in line with the stair step. But when you compare it to 2018, it makes it look down. But I have to look at data over a bigger period of time to try to establish trends. And so that's why you have that graph in there with 5 years worth of data, because that's generally what I try to look at. And you can see that consistently over the course of those 5 years, our activities have public demand. So those are people calling 911 or the non-emergency number. Those are not proactive activities like traffic stops that the officers are doing. Those are just activities generated through dispatch, and they have continually increased for the last 5 years. So our crime rate kind of fluctuates, but I can tell you that our crime rate is lower and has consistently been lower than both Washington County and the state of Oregon's average on any given year basis that we've checked. So we enjoy a very low crime rate in Sherwood and enjoy a level of safety that I intend to maintain. And as I've said, kind of tongue in cheek, I don't want to be the guy 10, 15 years from now that people are cursing under his breath because things have changed at that point. And how did that happen? Well, it would have happened because we didn't prepare for the future.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
Hey, Chief, it's Councilor Griffin. I have a quick question about a motorcycle.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Councilor Griffin. So I will let Craig chime in really quick if he'd like to on that, and then I will add a little additional color commentary.
Awesome.
So, Councilor Griffin, it is a total of $45,000, not $54,000. I'll take the hit that I hit the wrong key in our department putting that together. I won't blame anybody else but myself. But it's $45,000 for a bike. It's $35,500. Honda isn't made anymore for police bikes, and BMW is the bike that's out there. It's $35,500 for the bike, roughly, and another $9,500 to outfit it, which is radar, radio system for them, how it goes into their helmet, blue chip or however it's designed, as well as the decals to go on the bike.
There's no laser gun on it?
Well, that probably costs another $10,000 or something.
You mean
we could probably get up to the 54. But actually, I talked to David too. That was my fault, and we'll get it corrected. So it's actually 45. And then Chief can talk a little further because that bike might not need to be purchased for a little while.
Okay.
So thank you, Craig.
Yeah.
My additional color commentary on it is I was shocked at that number as well. And it was just a typo, of course, as he said, but I'm still shocked at 45,000. So what I can't control is what inflation and the market has done to the pricing of the vehicles. Frankly, I can't believe that we're budgeting police cars at 54,000, but it is what it is. So we kind of have to roll with that. And I think with respect to the motorcycle, I think we might have some more options. So the conversation is not necessarily over on that. And as Craig alluded to, we're going to kind of have to see where that goes. And we may not need to order that for well into the budget year. And so we're just going to have to wait and see.
Yeah, I think it's important. I thought about that a lot. I thought, the police need safe, reliable, dependable, fast vehicles, of course. I just couldn't believe a motorcycle was going to be the same as a Charger and the same as a full unit. But even still, even with Craig's, little flip-flop there, that's still right. That's a lot of money, isn't it? But,
it's pretty much BMW or BMW.
Yeah.
that monopoly gives you a little bit of strength.
Yeah,
Yes, no, I totally get it. I totally understand.
Is Harley not making police bikes anymore?
I honestly don't know, Council President, because they don't generally, the last time I was paying attention to Harley Davidson, they tended to offer the more traditional version, kind of like the old Kawasaki K1000, you know, with the big steps and saddlebags, and that's just not the kind of motorcycle that is used anymore around here anyway, and it's not the kind of motorcycle that our folks have been using. So, but again, where it's unfortunate that we're kind of forced into a BMW, and it's no knock against BMW, it's just not the cheapest bike on the market.
Thank you all.
Thank you for remembering your question, because we forgot it. Craig probably would have remembered it.
All right.
All right, thank you all.
We have one more part of general fund, and that's public works, parks, facilities, and fleet. So, Mr. Sheldon.
Okay, we'll start on parks. It's page 77A. Pretty much all three of these budgets, especially the parks, is pretty much provides the level of service that we provided the last several years. There's no real changes there. I just want to point out in the revenue side where you see 337,560, that's money coming in from the school district. We maintain their sports fields. Somebody asked the question earlier about school district payment. That's where that goes to help fund the actual maintenance. And that's about $200,000. And then the rest of that comes from us maintaining the fronts of their schools. So that's currently being negotiated with the school district, so that can change a little bit, but that's what we're expecting there. You'll see under 4363, that's our reservations of our shelters. You can see it's down a little bit this year because we've had to give refunds back. It's not a lot of money, but that's really the revenue of the parks maintenance. And the rest of the budget for parks, you got some one-time expense that Joe actually talked about. That's going to be covered in 6313, where you'll see an increase from last year's budget of 190. We're projected at 170, and this year's 229. So some of those projects for that is resurfacing the basketball court at Snyder. There's some log seats around the playground up there that are a safety issue that we need to deal with. About $10,000 there. There's a seal coat of one of the trails in Woodhaven that's on this year's maintenance list, as well as the parking lot at Stella Olson, the second one we built, is due for slurry seal. If I had to take any of those out, that would be the one I would take out, but you're just putting maintenance behind, and it's better to stay ahead of it before it starts really creating an issue there. Also, something in this budget at the bottom in 7054, I'll talk to David. I sent him a note today. There's $25,000 for cover that goes over the sandbox at Woodhaven. There used to be a tree there. That's a sunshade. I believe that can be taken out of SDCs versus one-time expense, but we'll get that figured out and get back to you on that. And that's really the park, so you won't see any changes in the park side of things for level of service this year. Any questions?
Thanks, Craig.
Yeah. Next one you want to do, we'll go backwards one, I believe, is facilities. Page 76A. The revenue of 4384 for 22,000. That's the money that comes in from Sesame Donuts for renting that space. There's usually some miscellaneous revenue that rolls in, stuff that we've sold from surplus or gotten rid of. So that's what the 7367, and that's really the revenue from facilities. You will notice a small amount of seasonal work that goes into here this year that we didn't have budget last year, and that's to help during the summer months, mow, that kind of stuff around our facilities. And then the other change you'll notice is 6214, there's $10,000 budget in there. That is our cooperative with Washington County Emergency Management. It gets pulled here, I believe, David, right? And then it gets pulled out of some different funds. Is that how that works? I thought it was. And then you'll see on the 76B, you'll see water purchases. I sent David an email down there on 6310, 20,000. We don't charge ourselves for water for our facilities. I don't know where that number come at in the budget there, so that'll be coming out. And then you'll see in 6312, there is an increase from 149 from last year to 224, and that is our one-time expenses for facilities. And this year we have a drainage project here at Public Works. We had a flooding situation off our roof. We're not properly connected in some ways out front of our building, and it flooded Kristen's office and that whole side of the building. So we have some money in there to make the repairs that tied in on the opposite side of the facility. You've got a police gate that the officers drive their police cars out every day. It's had some real problems. We got $10,000 in to replace that gate. It's pretty expensive to make the repair on it, and it keeps going bad. And then we have some blinds that are all bad in the library. It's been in there, auto blinds. They're about $20,000 that's in the budget. And then grouting and sealing the floors at the PD and the restrooms in there, the public side. And then you'll see in line 7020 and senior center gutters, downspouts, and the roof replacement. So we had that roof inspected about 3-4 years ago, and they gave us up to 5 years with that roof. There will be some dry rot in there, so that is included in this budget. I would hope that that would be closer to $45,000 to $50,000, but until they get the roofing material off, I'd rather have the money to be able to make the repairs. And that's really, level of service for facilities is the same. So that's the facility budget.
Just quick question. When you say there'll probably be some dry rot, do you think that's a result of putting off this maintenance, deferring the maintenance on that roof?
No, I don't think, I don't think so. There could be in a couple spots maybe that repairs have been made. I just know when you tear a roof off, you usually find some of that stuff in a building that was built back as long as it's been built, like what, 71, 70, in the early 70s, something like that.
Okay.
And I know it was changed out in the early 2000, like 2000 or 2001.
Okay, so it's not that terribly old.
So it's not, they would have fixed the dry rot then. It's just a matter of having the money to be able to do it and not running into other issues and not having the money in the budget year. So hopefully there'll be some savings. I mean, the PD roof this year, we had 191,000 budgeted. That come in at about 172. So you guys just approved that here not too long ago. So if we don't have any issues, there'll be some savings there.
Nice.
So any questions on facilities? And then the last one for the general fund is fleet. A couple things. We're having problems, just to kind of give you guys a heads up. We're having problems getting vehicles made that were ordered. They're taking a lot longer this year. We had Ford Interceptor, the police vehicles. Their plant was shut down for a while, and now it was shut down with the COVID. So we have a vehicle there. It's not in this budget. It's about $14,000 that will cost to outfit that when that gets here. But they just went back to work. We were hoping to at least get the vehicle here by the end of June. But then they shut down earlier this week because they had cases of COVID in their facility, so where they're making that car. So more to come on that. In the actual budget, we have some miscellaneous sales, and that's usually what we bring in our surplus of getting rid of vehicles when we retire the vehicles out. That's really the revenue that's in the fleet side. There's not a lot of increases here. You're going to see down below we've increased some money in the repair and maintenance, just like some of our equipment is getting older. As far as the budget part goes, there's an increase in some computer stuff. You got broadband radios and stuff that gets transferred out broadband into this, because that's where we buy all our radios and stuff. So there's some increases there, because currently the employees are using existing radios that we have here with the other folks that were already in Public Works, just because we haven't filled those positions, but we will be having people come on board. So that's really the fleet budget. And then we have the equipment that's budgeted in the fleet budget, and that is back on page 35. We do have a truck that's not on here that was in this year's budget out of streets. It's about 47,000. I got an email into David today on that. It's not in here. That's not going to be here at the end of June, just because the plant's been shut down. So we're going to have to move the money that was in the 1920 into this next year's budget. So you have the motorcycle we talked about already, and you have a police replacement car. That car is usually they run the patrol cars. We go 7 years or 100,000 miles. We have a 2012 that's got 101,000. That's the Dodge Charger that would be replaced. This additional police car is for the new police officers that are in the budget, the 1.7 FTEs. If you hire them, you're going to need a police car. You can add about $3,000 for fuel to that cost too. If you don't hire them, then $3,000 can come off the fuel and oil cost. And then you got about $500 worth of maintenance a year with the new cars for oil changes and everything else that goes on with that. So those are costs that are built into the fleet budget, but that is $54,000 if you don't hire the police officers, then you don't need that police car. Community development Jeep Cherokee, that's like about a 2000, I believe. It doesn't have a lot of miles on it. It's just 20 years old. Joe asked for this to be put in the budget. So we put it in the budget because it meets the criteria of our vehicles at 15 years. We have another Jeep in our similar that we end up having to put about $5,000 or $6,000 in, I believe, a couple years ago. So this one's a matter of time until that same engine problem probably happens, since they were bought at the same time, same type of vehicle. The Heister forklift, that's funded throughout all the departments. There's of the 30,000. General fund is I want to say it's 40. It's not a lot of money out of the general fund. The problem is it's a safety issue at Public Works. We got equipment coming in that we're offloading with too small of a Heister. So we'll hopefully get a trade-in or be able to off-sell this Heister to get a bigger one that we need to be able, especially the broadband and some of the water stuff. But everybody uses it. That's why it's spread out. I believe it come with the building. It was part of the sell. I believe it's an early 90s model. We just got it from when we bought the building, and we've kept it, and we've kept it up. We talked about the gate. The tow behind leaf blower, this is kind of a new, trying to be a little more efficient with staff in the parks when it comes to our leaf programs. Instead of just backpack spraying, we figure we can take this and use it in our park system to actually blow a lot of the leaves so they're not having to have the stuff on their backs all the time. It's more of a safety, kind of going in a different direction with that. Then your dump box, we bought a vehicle this last year that we knew that how the budget worked this last year, we didn't have enough money to be able to put the actual box in it, so we budgeted it separately. So we have the truck here. It's just a matter of switching boxes. Again, it'll be a dump box that allow safety, a little better safety practices for our employee loading grass in and out of the back of the truck. We have a zero-turn mower. It's on here for $18,000. It's got it's an 09, and it's barely plugging along right now, is what I'm being told as of this mowing season. So it was in the budget to be able to be replaced. So that's that machine. The leaf vac, we've added some safety features to this, so the guys aren't out actually during the leaf season with there's a hydraulic system on that. We could buy one a little cheaper, but for $5,000 or $6,000 more, it's pretty cheap compared to a back injury. And so that's why that one's 22 instead of 15 to 18,000, somewhere in there. We talked about the Snyder Park box covers, and that's what we got in fleet. Does anybody have any questions? I will tell you also, in the budgets all the way through Public Works, not just the general fund, but when we get in the enterprise, there is so much money in each section set aside for, we talked last year about going to the cloud. Brad's been working with us on that for Infor. And so each one of our funds, you'll see, has some money in there this year to be able to go to the cloud. Council just approved a contract the other night. So this year is actually when the money is going to be spent in the budget year. Any questions?
Well done.
Thank you.
Team does good work.
I have a great staff, so they do a lot of work.
Your staff is awesome, and I've said it many times. It's a reason when you drive around town, our streets and our roads and our sidewalks look so nice. And kudos for all the maintenance works you guys are sneaking in while all the buildings are closed. That's awesome.
We were really worried how we were going to get the concrete and everything and keep everything going at the art center, but it all actually worked in our favor. I mean, I'm sorry we shut everything down, but some of the things.
It's your fault.
Sorry for the revenue loss, but we got in to get our work done.
Making a little lemonade.
Also, the
Hey guys,
work
it is
for the
9
band.
o'clock. It is past 9 o'clock.
I'm sorry.
Yep, I'm good to go.
Somebody have a question?
No, statement.
No, I'm just stating that it is past 9 o'clock now. So,
Okay.
Joe, do we want to keep going or?
No, I think this is a good stopping point. We covered a lot in 3 hours, and it was probably a little bit taxing doing it virtually. So thank you for hanging in there with everyone. So we'll start back a week from tonight at 6 o'clock, and we'll go into the enterprise funds.
Okay,
Awesome.
so I'm going to officially call this meeting complete.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you,
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.